Hey, Dominic.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
Great, fantastic. Thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
Cool. So we have about like 5 people on video and probably another handful or so. I think about 12 or 14 people in total.
Cool.
Um, I'm already started recording this, so let me just kick off and as people join, they can join. So today we're here with Sean Ellis, who I guess in my opinion and probably everybody else's really needs no introduction, but just in case, Sean essentially coined the term growth hacker, which is a pretty cool notch on the resume. He's helped lots of hot tech startups like Dropbox and Zobni, LogMeIn grow like crazy. He's also founded and sold a company, Qualru, and started growthhackers.com. Most recently, he's launched the collaboration tool Projects, which I hope everybody in this course is already familiar with because there's a whole section on it actually, and it helps teams focus and accomplish their goals. So those are, a lot of cool names, but Sean, I'd love it to kick off if you would just, again, thank you for being here, but to kick off, if you would just tell everybody a little bit more about how your career evolved as a growth hacker and as a growth practitioner and what that means and kind of like how that's evolved into being a founder. And I just want to say one thing before that. If you have additional questions, just pop them in the chat and I'll keep a live tab on them. And then we'll move into discussion after. Okay. Cool.
Sounds
Awesome
good.
stuff.
My just kind of a high level on my career. I actually started in Eastern Europe where it kind of had the advantage of not having being in a place in the early 90s that didn't have a whole lot of kind of marketing and advertising background. So as a guy coming out of college with no experience, I at least grew up really looking at good marketing in the United States. So it kind of gave me the leg up. So I sold advertising for a bit, and then a friend of mine started an internet company, and it was 1995, and I got really excited about kind of the internet as an opportunity. Invested everything I had into the company, more than I had actually, sort of commissions owed to me as a sales guy, and then about 6 months later, I was able to talk my way into a job with them. They sent me to New York and to basically sell ads. It was a company called Uproar.com. So sell ads, but they really didn't have many users. So I started knocking on the doors of the big Madison Avenue agencies. They didn't want to reach the 17 users on the system. And so kind of took a temporary role to try to grow that user base. And won't go through every step of it, but we actually became the number 8 website in the world in terms of total usage time. So for a little company out of Budapest, to be able to compete against the biggest advertiser on the web at the time was Sony with their Sony Station games, and they had not only were they the biggest advertiser on the web, but they had Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune where they're blasting television, and we got bigger than those guys doing some pretty creative things. And then same group of guys started LogMeIn, where I also then went and ran marketing. And so basically first 10 years of my career were running marketing at these two companies that both did IPOs. And I realized through those experiences that really a big part of the success in both companies was getting the formula right up front. So making sure that the unit economics of the business worked, making sure that we got a value proposition that resonated with people well, got conversions working well, and really understood where the friction was, why people were trying to sign up for different services. And so I realized that in the 10 years of working with these companies, I had like 2 really valuable years and 8 years of kind of waiting out my equity appreciation for the hard work I'd done in the beginning. So coming off of LogMeIn, I decided I was going to try to structure something where I could just focus on that upfront part and have equity that would be fully vested pretty quickly. And so that's where I went. 6 months after I left LogMeIn, joined Dropbox. Split my time 50-50 between Dropbox and Eventbrite, and essentially kind of an interim VP marketing at both of those for a 6-month period. But again, on the back end, I would be fully vested, and ended up doing that for about 20 companies. And think we got, definitely Dropbox was the biggest, but Eventbrite was good. After those two, I did a company called Socialcast that sold to VMware for over $100 million, and Lookout, which, I think their last valuation was over $1 billion. So I got really lucky with kind of a string of good companies. You're a marketer or growth person is only as good as the potential of the opportunity that they were in, that they are in. And I happened to get into some very high potential opportunities, and obviously it's very easy to screw those up. So I'm proud that we were able to maximize against the opportunity. But if the product wasn't the right product in the right market, I couldn't have been successful. So there's a lot of luck in being in the right place at the right time. And then, after each of these companies, I got to the point where I wanted to do my own thing. I actually, from the minute I graduated from college, I wanted to do my own thing, but I kind of got in a good niche and a good rhythm to where it was hard to step out. And so that was kind of the next big challenge for me. And I've as Dominic was saying, first company I tried to do, I raised enough money that I still had half of it left when I realized that it wasn't viable. Then I acquired Qualaroo for a bit. We built that up to almost $2 million in recurring revenue. Sold that business last February, and kind of in parallel have been building growth hackers, and that's what my focus is now.
Cool, that's awesome. It's a great story. So one thing you mentioned, like you're known for growth, but you've mentioned marketing a lot too. Just really quick, in your opinion, what is the difference between growth and marketing? I get this all the time, especially when people are trying to hire somebody.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds kind of funny, but coming from me especially, I'm not sure that there is a lot of difference. I think that the reason that I came up with the term growth hacking was because it allowed me to define the characteristics of a growth hacker, define the characteristics of the person who I thought would be a really good replacement for me in these companies when I stepped out. Big part of my compensation was equity, so I didn't want to hand the baton to somebody who wasn't going to be very good.
Yeah.
But the truth is, growth hacking is marketing done the right way, I think is kind of the way to think about that. Marketing is this very generic term that means a million things to a million different people. So I wanted to have something where the only success metric that mattered was actual growth, was the actual output of the result. Where at the time when I was talking to a lot of founders, they were asking me, "Hey, we really need someone to help us build awareness in our company." Like, really? So the average person sees 3,000 advertisements a day. You've got these zillion-dollar companies like Anheuser-Busch that are just flooding, all media with ads. And you think on your little tiny startup budget that you're actually going to be able to build real awareness. So it's kind of a joke to me where, the truth is that if you can figure out the economics of acquiring a single user, and what, if you can do it for free, then the economics are really easy. But even if you pay to do it and you have a positive return on investment, you can build awareness through experience, through one user at a time. A self-sustaining growth engine is just so much better, and that's really what people should be focused on. And so that's to me why I why the term exists, and it was really meant to differentiate between, pick up any marketing book, and it's a good marketing textbook is probably 1,000+ pages, and startups will throw out a bunch of those. Somebody needs to mute.
Somebody mute themselves if they're not speaking, please.
Eventually the dog will finish mauling them, and then it'll be quiet again.
Yeah, right. Okay, I can just mute everybody. Oh, well, cancel. I want to mute you. Okay, great. Getting into the first question. So what's the best advice to a solo? I'm just going to kind of go through these fast because there's a lot of questions. What's the best advice to a solo entrepreneur to growth hack without assistance from a team? So basically doing it all yourself. So
I've never done that, so I don't know.
Okay. Cool.
So I want to make sure I understand the question there. Is it a solo growth hacker who's responsible for growth within a small startup, or is it literally a one-man company? If somebody can remember, if they ask that question, maybe they can clarify that. The one-man company I have never done.
So that's from Kim, right? So yeah, so Kim asked that, and so Kim doesn't have a background. You can join in if you want to, Kim. Unmute yourself and.
Okay. Yeah, I'm doing everything myself.
Okay, so you're a single, just like one person focused on the company.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, unfortunately, I'm not. It's really interesting that I've told my team a bunch of times that I came to the realization that I'm a pretty bad part-time marketer, part-time growth person. That the minute that I took on a CEO role and I had to do things like hiring and HR and make sure that the product's on the right track, and like the HR piece, like the human piece of running a team, I think is my most underestimated. That takes up probably more than half my time, and is really important, but kind of made me crazy in the beginning. And so at the end of the day, I had maybe 25% left for customer acquisition and growth. And I, in the past, had always been able to be obsessed with the challenge of customer acquisition and growth, and just immerse myself 24 hours a day, think of nothing but how am I going to solve this customer challenge. And so once I took on the CEO role, at most I had 25% of my time to do that. And then, outside of work, I'm thinking, gosh, is this person going to leave the team, or how do I get this person more productive, or is engineering working in the right way? Do I have the right person there? Like all of those sorts of things are going through my head. So that's a very long-winded way of saying I've never been in the position where I was both the founder and the guy who was responsible for growth and didn't have a team around me to cover some of the other bases. So unfortunately, can't help with that.
Kim, remind me when we talk about that, because I have some experience around that, unfortunately. This is a more tactical question. For a two-sided marketplace, how would you look at optimizing the ratio between supply and demand and managing growth campaigns for each side?
So, obviously every business is going to be different. So it's hard to kind of sort of go through a one size fits all. So, I can give you sort of a couple of generals, and then if the person who asked that question wants to maybe give a tiny bit of background about theirs, we might have a more concrete example to look at. But I'll give you just like one really good example would be generally one side is easier to get than the other, or if you have one side, it becomes much easier to get the other side, if that makes sense. So I'll just give you like an example from early in my career. When I was still in college, I was responsible for filling up a hotel in Greece, and I rode ferries to fill up this hotel in Greece. And if you don't really think of that as being a two-sided marketplace, but in a sense it was. That what it turned out is that it was a lot of single people going to this island, and my method was I would spend literally 90% of a ferry ride going to a group of attractive females and talking to them about the hotel, and I was literally playing tour guide. I had to work really hard. The beach is here, the town is here, the clubs are here. This is the ideal place to be. Here's some pictures of the view. I did give them a very rational argument, explain why this hotel was perfect for their needs, and they would always, if I gave them enough time and information, they would always agree, like, gosh, this sounds like a perfect hotel, the price is great. And then in the last literally 10 or 15 minutes of this ferry ride, I would go around to each group of the guys, and I would say, you guys want to stay in the same hotel as that group of girls? And they would all say yes. And so I could just go 1, 2, 3, 4. So, the one side brought the other side in very easily.
Okay, cool. The one other thing about that real quick too is like, I think it's kind of what you were talking about too. Like if you can have, you have to guarantee one side of a marketplace in order to get the other side rolling. So like Uber guaranteed the drivers first of all, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have the drivers.
And they tapped into a ready supply of black car drivers initially.
Yep. Nathan, did you want to chime in on what your specific question related to the marketplace thing was really quick?
Sure. Sean, thanks for being on the call. But yeah, so we're backlot cars. So we're a wholesale automotive marketplace. Helping dealers sell to other dealers. Right now, we've used direct sales as most of our only channel. But now as we scale nationally, we want to find some different marketing channels to maybe reduce our customer acquisition costs.
So which side is harder for you to get right now, the cars or the buyers?
The cars. Yeah, I would say it would be the cars, getting dealers to sell their wholesale inventory.
And so, yeah, so I mean, in a sense, but you can't get the people until you have the cars, right? You can't really, it's really hard to build the demand until you have the cars. So, I mean, one thing that you could potentially do is go out, like it kind of treat it as a broker service, go out and sell vaporware in a sense for the car, sell large blocks of cars that don't exist, and then work really hard to fulfill the order once you have the demand there. That's a kind of a game of chicken, but I'm not, and it might be something you've already tried.
Okay, so like selling potential inventory to the buyers.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what you're going for is marketplace liquidity first, and then you can start to tweak the economics. And so, that if you need to just manually broker a bunch of deals out of the gate, that you will probably get the attention of the supply side if you come with specific demand. I have someone who's looking to buy X. And you're essentially representing them one at a time. And I think reading like Paul Graham's article of Do Things That Don't Scale is probably like a good fit here, where it's just, you might have to be pretty manual and just kind of hustle and work it in the beginning. And with the idea that once you get over the hump and you start to get some marketplace liquidity, then it's a lot easier to just work to balance supply and demand. But in the beginning, you're trying to, you got to prime the pump and really make it work. So like another example of this would be what we did with Growth Hackers when we were building the community. The first guy who shows up, there's no articles, there's nothing. And so he shows up and he leaves and there's nobody to engage with. And if you look at my presentation from 500 Startups WMD conference, it's online. I talk about the amount of hustle and working 7 days a week for the first several months just to make sure that there was always fresh content. We as a team went out, got that content ourselves, gave the perception of votes. We put a lot more votes than were actually happening. We did everything that we could to kind of give the perception that somebody didn't feel like they were coming into a ghost town. And it was a lot of work, but we knew that there's no way we're going to succeed until we had some kind of liquidity of activity going on there.
Is that from the high tempo testing from last year?
I think so. Yeah. Okay.
Cool, guys. That one's actually pasted into the AMA session. So you guys, the link's right there, so you can watch it. Yeah. So yeah, there's Nathan and Justin. If you're there, there's some experiments based on what Sean said that we should add into your backlog around that. So let's touch base on that soon. Okay. There's two questions that I'm going to merge into one essentially. One is like, Sean, what are your main growth challenges? And like, what are your three main growth challenges for growth hackers and projects? And then somebody else asked, what would you say are the top three growth hacks for a B2B SaaS company? So I know that there's no way, like that's like kind of the silver bullet question, but what are the three things that have worked for you to actually drive signups and like good signups in a cohort that has retention? So
there's kind of I think it feels like a few questions packed in there. The one question that you said, what is the biggest challenge that we're having with growth hackers? Let me just start with that one, and then we can go to the next one. So for me, the big challenge right now, when I'm thinking about projects in general, the big problem is I have great top of funnel demand. When we were in private beta, we had 10,000 companies sign up for the private beta. Like we were like blown away by that number. And then I actually have really good bottom of funnel numbers. So if I get someone in a trial who has, multiple people on a team, they only need at least 2 people on a team and at least a couple of ideas in their project, 71% of them purchase. And so really good conversion. So it feels like, the business should be great, right? Mm-hmm. There's one part in the middle that I'm really struggling with right now, which is how do I get someone who signs up for a trial to actually become active? And that's where we have 94% of people who sign up for a trial don't reach what we consider active. And so that's my big challenge right now is how to bridge that gap. And I know we'll figure it out. It's a matter of we're just So I literally have on my team one objective for the entire company is figuring out how to get that 6% to 20%. And so I think that's a huge thing in any company is being really clear about what really matters right now. If I can't figure that out, my customer acquisition economics suck. The minute I figure that out, I can pay 4 times as much for a person to sign up for a trial. The minute I figure that out, I can start thinking, okay, how do I focus on long-term retention? But if I have that big bottleneck there, everything else is kind of a wasted effort.
Yeah. How do you apply what you did at Growth Hackers with the votes and everything to be ideas populated in there for these people already, right?
Yeah. I mean, so what I love is when I came up with that and I said, guys, I presented to my team and I said, guys, we need to take this number from 6% to 20% in 30 days. And, and this was in my executive meeting, my VP of engineering said, I just don't think that's possible. And, which is okay. I want him to voice that concern to me. And so I said, you don't think it's possible ever, or you don't think it's possible in 30 days? And, if I gave you 6 months where we focused on this, do you think we could do it? Yeah, I think we could do it. Okay. So now it becomes a time negotiation. We can do it at 6 months. We can't do it at 30 days. How much time do we need before we feel like we could get to that? We settled on 45 days, and he was totally comfortable with 45 days, wasn't comfortable with 30. But what's really cool is I went for lunch right after that. By the time I came back from lunch, he had created a clickable prototype of a new onboarding path. He's like, I feel like this is cheating, but if we did our onboarding this way, pretty much everybody would automatically go into this group. And that new onboarding path was launched yesterday.
Oh, that's awesome.
So whether it works or not, I don't know. But what I like is that the focus has caused even my VP of engineering to focus on that challenge and to use sort of his skill set to try to address that challenge.
Yeah, that's the focus thing is the main thing that we talked about in the growth mindset, which is the first lesson, which is something I learned from you. So that's awesome. So the second part of that question is growing a B2B SaaS business. What have been some of the things that you have found to be super useful, or what are some of the, I hate to say growth hacks, not to replace tactics, but what are some of the things that you found to be really useful specifically to drive new subscriber activation and getting people to stick? Well, you already mentioned that to stick around, but maybe the top of funnel.
Yeah. So I think B2B SaaS is one of the hardest kind of categories to work. And so I'm going to focus less on the specific tactics and more on the situation that you're dealing with. And then there's a lot of potential tactics that fall out of that. I'll share the tactics that I'm doing that work around that, but it's going to probably be different in each business. But basically what it comes down to is that B2B SaaS services are rarely adopted impulsively, right? So think about that. Somebody rarely is going to be, let's say, on Facebook, see an ad, and say, that sounds useful. I'm going to go sign up for a trial. I'm going to get me some of that stuff. It just doesn't happen that way for most people in a B2B situation. So instead, what they do is they decide that they have a problem, they look for a solution, or they They think that there's an opportunity that they may be missing, but it's usually they kind of decide that they kind of need a category of product first, and then they look for the right solution within that category. That there's just a much more considered approach to it. So how do you deal with that as a marketer? Do you just go and just keep trying to jam your product down their throat and hope that 1 in a zillion actually goes from a click all the way up to a trial and a purchase? I don't. That's a really hard path. So the answer, and the answer sucks. It's a really tough answer. The answer is that people, while they don't adopt a solution impulsively, they actually do adopt content impulsively. And so, 7 ways to overcome the challenges of agile marketing as a team. Like there's challenges of agile marketing as a team. I'm going to go read that. So if I go and read that article, I can now set the context in which my product makes sense. And I can have a better chance to, so I can impulsively market some content, and then I can market a product once I have their attention in a much broader context of why my product makes sense. And so that's actually where growthhackers.com came from, was that I came to that realization with Qualaroo that I couldn't market Qualaroo directly. I mean, we had pretty good organic growth because it had a powered by Qualaroo, which was seen, I think 3 billion times across the web. When the questions were popping up on people's websites, they saw the Qualaroo, so it gave them an awareness of that. And once they decided one day that they had a need, that was kind of top of mind for them. But that's kind of a slow boat. Like you can't accelerate that. It's just sort of what it is. Mm-hmm. And so I finally came to the painful realization that content marketing was how marketing solutions were being sold. That you had to basically put a bunch of content out there, and then within that content represent your solution. And I didn't want to do that because content, like I started in that, my first job was in business journals, and just like having content create, that essentially turns you into like a publication, and that's hard work. And so that's where I decided there's already such a glut of marketing content out there. Why not be the place that aggregates all of that marketing content, builds a community around that marketing content, so I can do one investment in a platform, and then from that I have the captured audience to be able to cross-sell my solution when it makes sense. So run Qualaroo itself on there. So we used to run lots of Qualaroo surveys across the Growth Hackers network, and that was pretty effective. But what you'll see with Growth Hackers projects now, one, the 10,000 beta signups I got were almost exclusively off of content that I created, either presentations that I did, live presentations, or in SlideShare. What you could see, the minute that I figured out how to use SlideShare well, we were on kind of this growth trajectory, and then I did something in SlideShare that basically turned the trajectory, which is when I was presenting in person, I had a few screenshots of the product in my presentation, and the first question was always, what's that product you're using to manage your experiments? And so it gave me an opportunity to say what it was, drove people to sign up for it. But when I put it onto SlideShare, I wasn't there to answer the question. So I just put one more slide at the end, which was a promotion for the product that had some pictures of the product and a link to sign up to request early access to the beta. And that drove a ton of signups for the product. What we have now for Growth Hackers that's driving project signups is a lot of it's around embedded ideas in the Growth Hackers community. So if somebody sees an idea in the community, they like that, they want to save it, they either save it to an existing project or it starts a new instance of a project. Invites are also really important for us. So once somebody's got a project and they start inviting other people to it, it helps it spread. But again, these are things that are kind of unique to my business. So what is the best way to grow a SaaS business? That's why I started with sort of the principle. The principle of B2B SaaS is rarely impulsively adopted. And so you have to kind of think about how do you set the context to where somebody would consider adopting your solution, and content marketing is usually the best way to set that context.
Cool. It's a very good answer. It leads well into another kind of like high level principle question, which is how do you personally go about dividing time between current channels and exploring new channels? Like knowing when something's working versus like experimental.
So it's changing a lot. So I think of it in kind of two pieces: time and resources. From a dollar perspective, I've always carved out 20% of my budget for tests, for kind of new channel development or extension within those channels. But the truth is, managing a proven campaign is actually pretty easy. Like that's where you can start to bring in different things like automation or just like a playbook where you just document, this is how we manage this channel. And you can put an intern on it if you're clear enough in what the playbook is. The big brain that you need is figuring out new stuff that's going to work. And in the past, you could be kind of slow about figuring out the new stuff, but today you got to be really fast about it, just because your existing stuff stops working much faster than it ever used to. And so the truth is that kind of like every 18 months, you're almost down to like 0% of the stuff that worked 18 months ago works exactly the same today. Like you have to make big adjustments, say within Facebook or within even Google AdWords. Google AdWords kind of gets pretty crowded, and so I think from a time perspective, it's almost the inverse of that budget that I talked about. So the time is like 80% in exploration, 20% in execution. And if you can get that 20% in execution down to 10% because you've built in a bunch of automation, even better. But so essentially what you're looking for is, how do I layer in more and more efficiency into the stuff that works so that I can free more and more resources and time up to find new stuff. And in the early stages, it can be pretty frustrating because before you find anything that works, it's 100% exploration, right? And so I had this conversation with my head of marketing yesterday. She's a few years out of school, so she's really talented, but she doesn't have. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, yes. So suddenly something went weird on my screen, so I want to make sure you guys can hear me. So she basically came back to me and essentially said, She's been doing a big Facebook exploration. I've been doing the retargeting on Facebook, which is like the lowest hanging fruit, which is pretty easy to generate cost-effective signups. But she's been doing the actual search within Facebook to find new scalable channels. The challenge with retargeting is that you're limited in scalability on that. So she came back and she was like, "Gosh, I don't think this works right now." And she's been, in the past when she was working on companies, it was always, she was executing proven tactics. And I said, you're doing something much more valuable now. It's frustrating, but you're looking for that first vein of gold now for scalable customer acquisition within what we've identified as an allowable acquisition cost. And so yeah, she's like 100% of her time on searching on that. But as soon as she finds something, like she's created way more value when she finds that first thing that works and scales than she ever had when she was just executing a known program. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Another good answer. And by the way, if people have like follow-on questions, please just throw them in the comments in the chat, and then we'll tack them in. So a couple companies in the program are at the point now where they're starting to make that first hire, that first growth hire, right? And this is, especially like when I was at 500, this is always a really challenging thing, because it's like, and you touched base on this a little bit earlier, like what are the things that person's supposed to do? How do you actually go about finding them? How do you test them? And can you talk a little bit about how you've done that? Because you've done that many times over and over.
Yeah, I gotta be honest. I haven't done it very well. Like it's actually hard to find people that are effective. Like that's the, yeah, it's the same. It's the exact same challenge that a VC has in finding an entrepreneur that's effective. Kind of think through that. And so what does that actually mean? Like they're making bets all the times on entrepreneurs, and they don't know if they're going to work or not. It's the same profile when you're hiring a growth person as an entrepreneur. It's really hard. It's really risky. You're putting yourself out there, and there's a good chance you're going to fail. And most people are going to go into CYA mode there, perception mode, like try to make everyone seem like they're doing a good job. But so to me, the profile that you should be looking for is either a recovering entrepreneur or an aspiring entrepreneur. And I think if you take Dominic and me, we both fall in that camp. Dominic is a recovering and now coming back on the entrepreneur side. And for me, for 20 plus years as an inside person, I was an aspiring entrepreneur. I let my dad talk me out of being an entrepreneur when I was coming right out of college. And he said, you got to get experience first, that you're crazy to go try to start your own thing. And, but it was always in the back of my mind that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I think that's the risk profile that you're looking for. Somebody who simply is excited about marketing and thinks it's cool and sexy. A lot of times they're the people that kind of get excited about the like big creative campaign awareness stuff, winning awards for great ads, like that a lot of that stuff just doesn't move the needle on growth. And that, to me, if I kind of talked about where my weaknesses are, I'm probably never going to be the guy who pushes for an awesome looking logo, even though I know that I probably should. Like the cost of that is not that high, but I'm going to have some underinvest in the perception of things. And I would then err to the side of being very economics focused, where it's sort of like, I truly understand the economics of customer value and customer acquisition, and know that an improvement in this number helps all of these numbers. It's a numbers game where it's then problem solving layered on top of a numbers game. So you need somebody who's pretty good at numbers and has good intuition around numbers, has a good history of problem solving, and to me, I think that fits in very well to kind of the entrepreneur mindset and the kind of the profile that good entrepreneurs have as well.
Yeah, I like the soundbite recovery and aspiring entrepreneur a lot. I also think curiosity, which essentially I think is a main component of that, is very important. And
what I can tell you just on that curiosity part is every good marketer that I know, the first thing they do when they wake up is they want to check stats.
Yep.
They just, I did it today. I'm listing a workshop that I'm doing in Berlin, and first thing that I did was, did I sell any tickets for the workshop? Cool. I sold 4 tickets overnight to the workshop. I have like 10 different numbers that I'm checking in around different types of things that I'm doing. And all day it's basically, I'm just so curious what ad people are responding to, what, if they filled out a survey, which survey they're responding to. It's like just a big human experiment all the time that I think is really interesting, and I get a little dopamine rush every time I get a response on something, and that's sort of what drives me.
That's great. Also, we have Archie Abrams from Udemy doing a course on hiring and building a team at the very end, which is probably an appropriate time. But if anybody's in that process now, let me know, and I can be helpful to some capacity there too. So that leads us to, you mentioned something about a marketer being really good at really like understanding the value prop, right? You told me probably some of the best advice around like, finding the outcome that people care about and then building your value prop around that. I think that's something that a lot of people, founders especially, forget, and marketers forget. Can you just share at a high level, like that whole like outcome mindset? Because I think that's just useful for everybody in business.
I don't remember exactly what.
So this is kind of like the $1 million consulting thing, where it's like, you know, like when we were sitting down.
Right, okay, yeah, having like in kind of just valuing the services, yeah, like in a sense. But I agree on marketing. It's the same way that it essentially, particularly like making the case for the price that you want to charge for your product. Or consulting or whatever, just like being able to say what constitutes success, and then what is the value of that success? Like how does that actually? And this I think is really good from a B2B SaaS perspective. Like what is, like our sales guys all the time say, like, if you do the trial, what does success look like? What would cause you to want to actually purchase this? So one, it kind of gives us something to focus on as we're onboarding them, and to try to get them to that situation. So success means my team actually adopts it. Okay, we got to really make sure that we work with them to get their team to adopt it. And then what is the value of that success? Well, if I have my team adopting it, then we'll all be on the same page. We'll be able to work much more effectively as a unit. We'll be able to achieve our goals as a unit. And as a result, we will be more successful in achieving our goals. So now, once they've told us the value of that outcome, then to be able to say, for $96 per month, is it worth that? Like, it's very easy for them to say, gosh, yeah, that's worth it. Mm-hmm. So I think yeah, if that, hopefully that's aligned with what the question you were asking there.
Yeah, totally. That's exactly it. And I just made a note that I need to do an exercise on value optimization, where everybody writes down like what it is that they're telling their customers versus like actually what their customers really are like seeking. Because that's like, it makes everything easier. So yeah. The next question is largely around product market fit, because somebody in the chat said, could I confirm something? It sounds like startups that have not achieved product market fit. So this is from Ernest. Companies who do not have PMF should not focus on growth. And so that leads me to ask you that question, and also, how do you know when you've achieved product market fit?
So I have an interesting post that I've been working off and on this for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. So my opinion has actually changed a bit since I wrote my startup pyramid post. Probably 7 or 8 years ago now, and it comes off of the back of my one of my board members the other day asking me, do I feel like we have product market fit? And what's interesting is I learned about the concept of product market fit from Mark Andreessen, and in some blog posts that he ended up taking down. But what he talks about there is, you'll know it when you have product market fit, because you'll be struggling to keep up with demand. Stuff will be flying off the shelves. And until you have product market fit, that's the only thing that matters. Get to product market fit. But once you have it, then you can focus on business building and scaling around that. Now, the opposite article of that would be the one I've already referenced earlier, is do things that don't scale. Mm-hmm. So what Paul Graham talks about is you got to go out in the beginning and recruit one customer at a time, and basically do whatever you can. They talk about Stripe. He talks about Stripe in there, where Stripe literally didn't just reach out to other portfolio companies and say, hey, sign up for Stripe. They said, give me your computer. They would go in and set up Stripe on their computer, get them going on it. And so those are two very different messages, right? Like, one saying focus on product until you don't have to do anything and it's going to take off. And someone else saying, like, scrape by one customer at a time, and you got to go through the really hard stuff to get growth. Eventually the flywheel kind of kicks in and you get things, but in the beginning, law of small numbers, you can have a good 10% week over week growth rate when you're scrapping out every single person. I actually think that they're both right, and that the kind of tiebreaker comes from Steve Blank, who talks about market types. And what you're talking about here is that if you're developing a somewhat of a new market, the market adoption looks very different for a new market. You have to be patient. You have to. There's a lot of figuring out, a lot of forcing a customer to use it, to see them how they're using it, to learn from them, to adjust your value proposition as they come in, to understand the context of why it's important to them. It's a slower process if you're creating somewhat of a new market. Like if they already have a budget for what you've created, like if you're, again, looking at like B2B SaaS, then you're entering an existing market and you just have to be incrementally better. That company is going to grow very fast if you're incrementally better in an existing market. But if you're in a new market, you have to scrape out every user one at a time. So this question of product market fit, I think, is kind of a hard question, and one that I'm not completely against kind of my startup pyramid, but just try to recognize what type of market you're in. And I think it's very rare that you have the Mark Andreessen situation where things just explode because you have the right product in the right market. So just be ready to have to hustle pretty hard.
So I completely agree with you, and this is my take on Ernest's question too, and completely disagree with me if you want to. Is that early growth, is very much aligned with finding product market fit, because it's very experimental. You're finding the right customers, you're finding the right value prop, you're experimenting with different channels. When people say growth, don't go after growth until you have product market fit. I believe that is really the thesis of like, don't go out and spend $100,000 on ads. Don't hire a full-time team. Don't try to scale and operationalize growth until you know that you are meeting demand. So,
yeah, until you have some sort of formula figured out.
Yeah, and like that is something that we're going to talk about too, which is like loops, right? In growth modeling, it's like we do X, we get Y, and that leads to Z. And once you have that loop, like Sean explained that loop earlier, from a retention standpoint, he has two people are on there, and there's two ideas. That's the right growth, right? Then he has 75% or 78% retention or something, like, right?
71%.
71%. So like that's a loop, right? And so like you want to look at each of, and we'll do a lesson on loops too shortly. That's a lesson that's something that you guys should all be thinking about. Is like once you have that loop, then you want to spend more time on growth. And that's probably something, Kim, to your point too, the very first question is like, how do you balance your time? Is like once you have that loop, you can spend more time on growth. Then I lost my train of thought. So have you ever worked, speaking of product market fit, have you ever worked on a project that you couldn't grow? And like, how did you, because this is something that as founders, like, it's sunk costs. You just keep going and going and going. You're like, it has to work. How do you know when to kind of nix it, and like when there just isn't good product market fit?
So yes, I mean, I've definitely, the first businesses I talked about, like I don't know that it was necessarily a lack of product market fit, because we had a 40% of people. So the first business was called Catch Free, and we had 40% of people who we surveyed said that they'd be very disappointed without the product. But we had some kind of key business premises for starting that ended up being proven to not be true. So not only do you need product market fit, but you need kind of a formula that's going to work with it. So the two things that turned out to be challenging for us. One, this was an app distribution platform for freemium apps and services. And what we found is that the average person who only returned once every 2 months. So people, if you think how many new apps do you download in the course of a year? Probably not more than a few. And so trying to build a business that it needs to have some kind of habitual usage off of people downloading multiple apps. So it was this realization that I can't build habitual usage on a product like this. So everything's kind of a learning from the previous thing. So what am I doing with projects? I'm building something that people use every single day, multiple times a day, multiple people use multiple times a day. So it's like, now I know if I'm building a business, it needs to have kind of a habitual usage pattern to it. And then the other piece is I thought I could arbitrage customer acquisition across a whole bunch of categories of freemium apps and services. And Google banned us they banned us twice. One, because we didn't comply with their kind of like landing page sort of business. They looked at us just simply a intermediary that didn't add value. Then we turned it into a comparison engine, and they found another reason to ban us. And so while we had that 40%, we basically, my source of customers that I was planning to get didn't work out, and my ability to retain customers. So even the people who came back every 2 months, most people forgot to come back. So they loved it when they were there, but they forgot to come back because we couldn't drive that habitual usage. So I couldn't retain and I couldn't acquire. And I just looked at it that I had already spent a couple $1 million. I had $3 million left. I didn't have faith that I was going to be able to turn that into a business. So that's where I took that money, acquired an asset, and then built up a different asset that kind of had product market fit already.
Got it. Yeah. So it's just that gut check where you knew the struggle was going to be too hard. There wasn't a way to accomplish it. Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so one thing I want to say on the product market fit question as well, though, and this is, I think, the kind of the key of how I even sort of identified the importance of product market fit, and I think is the key for growth for everybody. But we're out of time. No, just kidding. The piece that I think everybody needs to do is really kind of do that root cause analysis of what is holding you back from growth, and try to figure out what is that one most important thing that's holding you back from growth. And if nobody wants the product that you've created, you're going to have a very hard time growing it. And so product market fit is kind of like at the most foundational place, what could be causing you not to grow. But bad conversion rates also could be causing you not to, like people love the product, but I can't get them to try the product, which is kind of what my case is right now. People love the product once they've tried it, but I can't get them to give it the right type of try. Single user experience on my product sucks. Multi-user experience is great. I can get the single user, getting the multi-user is hard. But once I've identified that, and then it's all like, how do I focus all my creative energy and work to get people to the multi-user experience on the product? And I think every business sort of has that same thing. So it's either, and that's what my startup pyramid post is really about, is that if nobody likes the product you've created, you're going to have a really hard time growing it. And so you got to validate that no matter how much challenge they have getting started with it, some people are going to get through that and actually use it. And if they like it, then that's a good sign. And then your next challenge is, how do I get them started using it? Like, what is if I don't have a smooth process from a value proposition that's compelling, I've stripped out any of the challenges to trying that product. I can tell you, like with projects, we kept kind of adding things to it. And then one day I looked and I was like, we have a 12-step onboarding process. This is ridiculous. Like, who the hell is going to go through 12 steps to get this started? So then our big focus was, we got it down to 4 steps, and it made a lot more sense. And then we realized that the perception on our pricing was so high that somebody didn't feel like the value proposition was worth the effort to even try the product. So we had to change the perception on our pricing and list the per seat price rather than the minimum seat price. And we changed the minimum seat price. So now the reward on the end was worth the effort of getting started. So it's constantly trying to figure out what is that one most important thing that's holding us back, and how do I address that one most important thing so that I can get on to the next thing. And I think the challenge that most marketers have is that they're trying to do 25 things simultaneously, and they're doing a bad job with all of them. And that means that they're putting 1/25 of their effort into the one thing that really matters.
Yeah, couldn't say it better. That was one of my questions, was going to be, what is like the biggest danger? But you just, to a marketer or to a growth hacker, you just answered it. So I have some questions from the audience I just want to shoot through because we have a couple minutes left. One is from JP, says, Sean, do you still use the 40% if they can't live out the product? Like, is that still a benchmark that you would use in using like the Qualaroo type thing?
It is, but again, like just again, my perception of product market fit has changed a bit, but that question of if nobody likes the product, I'm not going to be able to grow it. So regardless of how much friction there is to get started, if I get 1 million people who try to use it, but I only get 50 people who use it, I'm going to ask those 50 people who are really using it well, how would they feel if they couldn't use it anymore? If all of them come back and say, I wouldn't give a crap, then do I really have something that's growable? No, I better keep focusing on the product. So what I'm looking for is that 40% is essentially, once I get to the 40% of people who I ask, how would you feel if you couldn't use this product anymore? Once I get to 40% who say they'd be very disappointed, I know I can grow that business. It doesn't mean that I can grow it fast. It doesn't mean that I can grow it easily, but I know that the finish line is good. I got to get the right start line. I got to get the right path. I got to get, I got to figure out everything else, but I have something to figure out. If I don't even have a product that people want, I'm lost. And so that's the challenge as a founder that I've had. When I'm a marketer, I can seek companies that have that. So that was kind of my litmus test to go and work with companies, was I needed some of that user passion for the product itself. If you have the user passion, I'll go out and find more users like those people. But as a founder, I actually have to drive the creation of a product that people want, and people are fickle, and it's really hard to find an unmet need in a way that it's not just an unmet need, but it's a need that they consider important, and the solution is the right solution to that unmet need. There's a lot of variables there that it's hard to get right. Once you have that right, then it's an execution challenge.
Yeah, I'd like to just add there too that false negatives are really dangerous when you're just basing it on a benchmark like that, because it could just mean that you have the wrong customer that you're addressing, like the wrong segment or the wrong solution for them. So like if 40% of if you do that type of survey and 40% of the people don't say they couldn't live without it, it doesn't mean shut your business down. It means like look at each layer coming down. And this is something we can talk about, the pivot pyramid too, which is something that my co-founder and I were working on that I'll share with the group. I just want
to add one thing to what you just said there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you don't have 40% overall, segment the data.
Yeah.
You might have 40% if you only look at the college students. You might have 40% if you only look at the women. You might have 40% if you only look at professionals. You don't need 40% overall. You need 40% within a targetable segment.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. And then there's the last two questions we're going to have. One is very specifics around from Shocker. How do you determine what's an acceptable PPC, CPC, and what do you benchmark CPC against? I think that the right answer here is it depends, which sucks, but that leads us into unit economics. Can you just kind of like give a good idea of like how you look at unit economics from like a ratio standpoint?
Yeah, so let me, because I think it is somewhat of a depends on PPC, but there's actually something that is pretty specific that you can look at.
Right.
So obviously the most important piece, like you shouldn't do it at all if you don't have a return on investment. If you don't have if the lifetime value of a user, when you model it out from click to sign up to purchase to retain, if the cost of generating a customer is higher than the cost than the value of that customer, don't do it at all. The challenge for a lot of people is if the cost of is slightly less than the value of that customer, should you do it? And that's where the answer is it depends. At Log Me In, we spent $1 million a month, and we recovered that $1 million within 3 months. So we could cycle $1 million back into marketing over and over and over again. And so it's really time to payback is also a really important question. And so in a lot of businesses, it's, so if you've got $1 million left on your balance sheet and it takes 2 years to recover that return on investment from that user, and you're spending $1 million a month, you're out of business the next month. So yeah, you did profitable acquisitions, but you put yourself out of business. So that's where you have to have kind of the situational awareness of based on what your balance sheet is, time to payback. If you're in a startup, if your runway is 6 months and your time to payback is 8 months, you're moving your company closer to going out of business if you're not able to recover that. But that's easy then. So just adjust your PPC a little lower to give yourself at max a 5-month payback period on the dollars invested, and then you're extending your runway. So that's where the kind of situational awareness. So if you don't have a positive return on investment, you should never do it. But even if you do have a positive return on investment, then you need to think about things like, how do I reduce my cost per click to give myself a payback that's fast enough. But then there's some other things that you can do. How do I push annual plans instead of monthly plans? So we just, in my company, started pushing annual plans within the last couple of days. And an annual plan means that you get all those dollars up front. So discounting 35%, which is what we're doing on an annual plan, but I get it all day one. And so that's how we were able to have Log Me In, a 3-month payback on our marketing dollars invested. We invested marketing dollars based on a potential 12-month, like we needed to recover those within 12 months, but we had 70% of our users were on annual plans. So it averaged out to being 3 months to get the dollars back.
Okay. Cool. Yep. That's a very useful benchmark. Very last question, because we're running a bit over. Who are some of the other marketers, growth practitioners that you admire, that you follow, that other people should pay attention to? Good sources of knowledge, stuff like that.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of it kind of depends like in what area. So if I'm trying to go really deep within a platform, then there's going to be some super knowledgeable people about Pinterest or Facebook. I was going to say Twitter, but Twitter, there's not a ton of complexity with Twitter. So, but some of these kind of more where there's a ton of nuances within a platform, the more you understand about that platform, the more you're going to figure out the angles to drive effective customer acquisition off of it. And so you want somebody who's really has deep knowledge about that. For network effect businesses, like James Courier, I think is awesome. Doesn't put a ton of content out there, but everything he puts out there is really good. And then there's a lot of people like Ed Baker is awesome with virality, for example, but he doesn't put any content out there. So not, it's kind of, it's knowledge meets openness are the kind of two things that you need to look for. So the good ratio of people on that, I think Dominic would be there. I think Andrew Chen is there. Andrew Chen puts out some really good stuff. Tammy Camp, who you worked with before, I think she's got some really good stuff that she puts out. Andy Johns, he doesn't put a whole lot out, but the few presentations that I've seen that he's put out are great. Brian Balfour. So yeah, I mean, like the videos on the WMD site are you can see a lot of really good people on that.
You're amazing. This gave me a great idea that I should put together a matrix for like the specialty, like the platform, and then like some other resources. That's a good, so I'll work on that. Okay, cool. Well, hey, thank you so much for doing this. This is really, this is fantastic amount of knowledge. It's recorded, so I'm going to cut it down and polish it and share it with the whole group, and I'll share it with you too. Okay.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks everyone. Good luck.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining.